Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Altogether, let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. The word of the Lord.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Great tag teaming today. And hello again, everybody. This is officially a simple church sermon. So, how in the world do you deal with this subject, a communal rule of love, in 10 minutes with all the children present, with folks on Zoom, and I have to cover 2,000 years of church history, and introduce a concept that's actually going to take us about a year process to work through, and do all of that in 10 minutes. I can do it. I can do it. Ready, set, go. So the challenge, of course, is that even though there's 2,000 years of church history behind this, it's relatively unknown in our time. So that's the big challenge. We got this big learning curve to go through. And as we walk through this series, it's going to be teaching, but it's going to be a lot of practice. And we'll do that today. So, how many here love rules? Raise your hands. When you're driving. I love rules when I'm playing basketball and we get these hockey players that join us. And they want hockey rules when they play basketball. Or the American football guys who pick the ball up and start running with it. No, we all have this love-hate relationship with rules, don't we? And yet we recognize that they are important. It's a huge concept, this idea, rule of love. And our text that we read today tells us, in essence, there's really only one rule. I remember one of our homestays, Raphael, showed up from Brazil. You know, the Brazilians, they're a bit out there, right? And the first question she asked about our house was, what are the rules? I thought, oh boy. And you know what came out of my mouth? I said, just be considerate of each other, and everything else will take care of itself. Now, we had to flesh that out a little bit as to what that looks like in this time and season. But from then on, she got it. She got the heart behind the rule. It wasn't to take away the joy, as Karen just prayed, but it was to enhance the joy. And so our scripture tells us that there's only one rule, and that is to love well. I love this quote. I think Brian Zahn drew it from Dostoevsky somehow, but it's like this. Life is not a game of winners and losers, okay? So when we talk about rules, we're not talking about competition. We're not trying to better somebody else. It's not a game. Life is a gift. So if we take the heart of rules being, life has been given to me as a gift so that I can learn to love well. And in the context of that, that's what rules are for. They're like the trellis for a plant, right? We got so many trellises in our neighborhood. It's these wooden things. They're dead, aren't they? But they provide structure for life to grow. I'll bring some pictures next week. So I was praying I was on my deck, Wednesday or Thursday morning, and I was saying, oh God, I have 10 minutes to introduce a 2,000-year-old concept to a generation that doesn't know a lot about the rule of life and the rule of love. How am I going to do that? And right then I saw this. This was flying over my head. Okay, not exactly this. I stole this off the internet. You have to give credit, right? So I stole this. And because it was a little, I wouldn't have gotten a good picture, but I basically saw this flying over my head. And I discovered the gospel of the goose as I was thinking about it. And this iconic flying V is, most of us understand the concept of this. And as we know, it's more than just allowing the geese to see the back of the bird in front of them as it flaps its wings, but it's creating lift. Each bird is creating lift for their fellow birds, reducing resistance, allowing them to fly with less effort, and they can fly 70% farther when they're together than when they're alone. And as you know, the lead goose there rotates, doesn't he or she? Or they go to the back, right? And do you know what they do at the back? They go, this sucks, man. I used to be the lead goose. Now nobody sees me. No. You know what they're doing? Does anybody know what they're doing at the back? River, what are they doing at the back? What's the goose doing at the back? What does he do? He honks. Honk! What's he doing? Is that a honk of whining? What's he doing? He's cheering the lead goose. He's cheering the geese. They've discovered this, that it's actually an act of encouragement. That the goose, the bat goose is honking encouragement to the geese in front of him, and they are encouraging the lead goose particularly. I thought that's profound. That is so profound. And they have found geese will sometimes try to do it on their own, but they very quickly move back into formation because it's such hard work flying alone. So the first goose rule of love is we fly further when we fly together. Question, trick question. What was the first thing in the Bible God said was not good? Not good. It's not good for humans. Because right back then it was a human, male and female. Not good for humans. Everybody say human. Not good for humans to be alone. Not good. And guess what? There was no sin yet. Guess what? The human had God. But yet God said, it's not good. We were made, as Thomas Merton said, we are not individualized units. We are persons who are connected in the image of God, who is triune and has been a community from all eternity, right? That's our humanity. We're not human when we live alone, when we are alone. So the second thing I saw is this. I saw, as I was looking up, I saw a bird circle away from the flock and circle around and come back and join the flock. I'd never seen that before. So Dan, I needed inspiration, Birdman, and you know what I did? I appealed to Saint Google. Saint Google. If you don't know what I mean by Saint Google, you haven't heard Dan's rap. Dan has these legendary raps, and he did one at camp. You got to look it up. Let the wise understand. But I looked up in St. Google, and you know what I found out about this bird that flies around in circles? Absolutely nothing. I couldn't find anything. But what I did find was a whole bunch of other things that I needed to find out, and God said, I tricked you. So what I found out was that birds will not leave one another alone. If a bird gets tired, if a bird gets sick, if a bird gets old and can't fly anymore, one or two other birds will stay on the ground with that bird, either until they can fly again and they're better, or until they die. That's amazing. So second goose rule, no one is left alone. Hey church, well done. I think you do this quite well. You stay with people, even if they can't come here physically. even if they're sick, even if they're old or older and tired, you stay with them. Goose rule number 2, no one is left alone. The third thing I found out is geese are incredibly loyal. In fact, they're monogamous for life. They have this loyalty towards one another, and when one of their mates dies, they will grieve for a significant amount of time. So there's a loyalty, but it's not out of some kind of rule. It's a sense that we belong to one another. When I say my wife, when I say my son or my daughter, or my friend or my sister or my brother, that's not a possessive word. That's a belonging word. I belong to you. You belong to me, and that's New Testament. We belong to one another. There's a covenantal aspect of that for life. Yeah? So, geese are extremely loyal. And here's geese on land. Here's another thing I found out, is that geese, when they're feeding on land, they gather in what's called gaggles. You ever heard that word, gaggles? You know what a gaggle is? It's a cluster of families in singles that gather together and group together and fly together. So I think we should change our name to Vancouver Eastside Vineyard Gaggle. Right? But here's the thing. Look at this gaggle. You know what they're doing? They're eating, but 2 are sentries. 2 are stationed to protect and watch out for danger. And what about them? Are they going to starve? No, they rotate. They go into rotation, and then they take turns, and they'll eat, and 2 others will become sentries, and they'll watch. Now, I know in Vancouver, it's a bit of a sore point. I know they hold up traffic. I saw a traffic jam the other day, and these geese were jaywalking. They were straight out of Commercial Drive. But I think there's a lot of wisdom coming through the geese in this. So they honor one another, and they serve one another in turns. They give each other breaks. They help each other take rests and eat and have rhythms. There's a mutuality about the geese. And then finally, I saw this, and I've already touched on it again. It just was really impressed on me that this honking, they cheer each other on. My auntie used to bring one of those to basketball games. It was so embarrassing. But boy, it was cheering us on, right? And I was sharing at Wade and Joe's 25th a couple weeks ago that when I did the sun run, I completed the fastest time. And by the way, congratulations, Shalisha. Shalisha finished the triathlon on Monday. Well done. Yeah. Swimming, cycling, running in Stanley Park and around. So good. But then, what I noticed about my race is that I recorded the fastest time I'd ever recorded when I did the 10Ks in April for the sun run. And when I was reflecting on it, I realized it was the cheerleaders. At about every kilometer, every milestone, there's cheerleaders. They had drums and horns, and they were banging. And there was even an indigenous group. They were drumming at one and just singing their native songs. It was so awesome. And then at the very top of the last hill, there was this guy that was the Grim Reaper. He was dressed like the Grim Reaper with his sights, and he goes, "It's all downhill from here." It was so fun. But there's something about cheerleaders, cheering each other on, encouragement. It's just August, and I do this every year. It's kind of a ritual for me, but I've had all kinds of medical tests and eye tests. I had an eye doctor who did a very thorough test of my eyes, and I went for blood tests, and I had a respiratory test. I was up in VGH for an hour on Friday. Then I had this x-ray for my back. And every time, it was totally unplanned, but I said to the technician or to the doctor or to the nurse practitioner or whoever it was, I said, "Thank you." I said to my eye doctor. I said to her, lovely Palestinian woman. And she put some stuff in my eyes. I couldn't see for half the day. After that, my pupils dilated. And she just, man, she would, and it hurt sometimes. She was just looking every angle. And as soon as she was done, I went, oh, thank God. But then I said to her, thank you for being so thorough. And then when the respiratory technician on Friday, when she was done, I said to her, thank you so much. Keep up the good work. And she said, thank you. And our healthcare, and you know, there's so much fatigue. You know, there's a great resignation going on, isn't there, in our culture right now? It's happening, a shortage of workers in every profession. Pastors are resigning in droves. Church volunteers are quitting because people have been trying to fly alone too long. It's fatiguing. And that fatigue happened 10, 20 years ago when books like Bowling Alone came out, telling us about the loneliness and disconnection of our society. And COVID just uncovered it. And it's become an epidemic. We're fatigued. And we need to be a culture that encourages each other. Every Sunday after church, Tay sends me the staff agenda. And every time he sends me 1 or 2 sentence encouragement about the Sunday service. And it just means so much to me. Just that simple little encouragement. And of course, I'm married to Ms. Encouragement. And so many of you are so encouraged. But the goose rule is that we live and thrive in an environment of encouragement. So, to conclude, a community rule of love is designed for a specific community in a specific place and a specific season to help us practice and grow in the art of loving well. So in other words, the rules change. 30 Ks an hour is very loving when you're driving down my street. It's not all that loving on Highway 1, right? Stopping at the intersection is loving when the sign says this and mom says, don't cross. But the rule changes when the walk sign comes up. And our lives are like that. The rules change because of seasons and circumstances that we're in. The key is to live and abide in the love of God. And that's where wisdom comes in. And so my heart is for us to not have these fixed rules that are the same for all time and eternity. But the wisdom of the church history has always been there's certain contexts where a rule of love is right for that time. And they're mutually agreed to help us grow in love. So for a couple minutes, what I'd like us to do is just to invite us back into silence. And I'd like you to look at these 5 goose wisdoms that we have. Goose, good news. Mother, wasn't there a gospel Mother Goose at one point? Yeah, I thought, yeah, she's Catholic. And we fly farther. Yeah, I want you to just listen. Get yourself comfortable. Just for a moment. And then we're going to go down together and talk about this. We fly farther when we fly together. No one is left alone. We belong to each other. Mutual belonging. We take turns serving one another. We live in an environment of encouragement. So let's just take a couple of minutes and reflect on this question. In light of the current season you are in, what is most alive for you right now in the art of loving well? Where might there be an invitation? So let's just take a couple of minutes and reflect on that.